I'm a 20-year-old college student, and until last week I lived at home with my parents and my older sister Aubrey, 24. Our family isn't wealthy, but we've always managed to get by. For the past 2 years, I've been working part-time at a local bookstore to save up money for grad school. It's been tough balancing work and studies, but I've managed to put aside a decent amount. Some background on my family dynamic. My parents have always favored Aubrey. For as long as I can remember, they've pampered her constantly and let her get away with pretty much anything. Aubrey is, to put it bluntly, bratty and full of herself. But my parents never seem to notice or care. This favoritism has been plain in countless situations over the years. When we were kids, Aubrey would often break my toys or mess up my school projects, but my parents would always dismiss it as siblings being siblings. They'd buy her a new toy to make up for the one she broke, while I'd be left with nothing. As we got older, the favoritism only became more pronounced. For Aubrey's 16th birthday, my parents threw her a lavish party and bought her a car. When my 16th birthday rolled around 2 years later, I got a cake from the grocery store and a $50 gift card. One incident that really stands out happened last Thanksgiving. My mom had spent hours preparing a traditional dinner, including a homemade pumpkin pie for dessert. When Aubrey saw the pie, she threw a fit because she wanted pecan pie instead. She actually knocked the pumpkin pie onto the floor and stomped on it like a toddler having a tantrum. Instead of getting mad at her for this outrageous behavior, my parents apologized to Aubrey. They drove 30 minutes each way to the only open bakery in town to buy her a pecan pie. Meanwhile, I was left to clean up the mess of the ruined pumpkin pie. Aubrey has also had a long string of boyfriends that she brings home. My parents welcome each one like he's already part of the family, no matter how Aubrey treats them or how long the relationship lasts. Her current boyfriend, Mark, has been around for about 6 months. He's a pretty stubborn and opinionated guy, but for some reason, my parents adore him. Mark's presence has only worsened the existing family dynamics. He seems to take pleasure in putting me down and asserting his dominance in the family. My parents, of course, always take his side. For instance, last month we all went out to dinner for my dad's birthday. I had just received my tax refund, so I offered to treat everyone as a special gesture. Before I could even finish speaking, Mark loudly proclaimed that he would be paying instead. I politely declined and explained that I wanted to do this for my dad. Mark got visibly angry and started arguing with me at the table, saying I was trying to show off. Instead of intervening, my parents took his side and told me to stop being difficult. In the end, Mark paid for the meal, and my parents thanked him profusely while completely ignoring my original offer. Another time, I was watching a movie in the living room when Mark and Aubrey came in. Without asking, Mark changed the channel to a sports game he wanted to watch. When I pointed out that I was already watching something, he laughed and said, "Too bad, Squirt. Majority rules." My parents, who were in the kitchen, overheard and told me to let Mark watch what he wanted because he was a guest. These are just a few examples of the daily small favoritism I've had to deal with. Despite all this, I've tried to maintain a good relationship with my family. I help out around the house, keep my grades up, and work my part-time job without complaining. The current situation started about a week ago. I was showing my friend a funny text on my phone when Mark happened to glance over. He saw my bank account balance in one of the notifications. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I should have known it would lead to trouble. A few days later, during dinner, Aubrey announced to our parents that she wanted to start her own small business selling handmade jewelry. My parents were thrilled and immediately started discussing how they could help her get started. They asked about her business plan, potential costs, and marketing strategies. Aubrey, in her typical fashion, hadn't thought any of this through. She just liked the idea of being a business owner and wanted to jump in without any real planning. Then Aubrey dropped the bomb. She said she knew I had a lot of money saved up and suggested I give it to her to fund her business. I was shocked and felt betrayed. I knew Mark must have told her about seeing my account balance. I tried to calmly explain that the money was for my education and future. I told them how hard I'd worked at my part-time job to save that money, often taking extra shifts and working holidays. My parents got upset and said I was being selfish. They argued that I should support my sister's dreams and that her success would benefit the whole family. I pointed out that Aubrey had no experience in jewelry making or running a business. I suggested that if she was serious about this, she should start small, maybe take some classes or start an online store with minimal investment. But my parents wouldn't listen. They were already imagining Aubrey as a successful entrepreneur. Over the next few days, my parents kept pressuring me to give Aubrey my savings. They guilted me by saying I owed it to the family since I lived at home rent-free. They brought up every little thing they'd ever done for me, from buying me school supplies to driving me to soccer practice years ago. They made it sound like I was ungrateful and selfish for not wanting to hand over my hard-earned money. I stood my ground and refused. I tried to explain that while I supported Aubrey's ambitions, I couldn't put in danger my own future. I suggested that if they believed in her business idea so much, they could take out a loan or use their own savings to help her. This only made them angrier. The situation got worse when Aubrey and Mark got involved. Aubrey would cry to our parents about how I was crushing her dreams. Mark would make mean comments about how I thought I was better than everyone else. The atmosphere at home became unbearable. Things came to a head yesterday. My parents sat me down for what they called a serious talk. They gave me an ultimatum: either give Aubrey the money or move out. They said if I wasn't going to contribute to the family, I couldn't live there anymore. My mom said, if you can save all that money while living here for free, you can afford to get your own place. My dad added, you're obviously not a team player, so maybe it's time you learned how the real world works. I was hurt and angry. I felt like my own parents were choosing Aubrey's whim over my carefully planned future. I decided to leave on my own terms before they could kick me out. That night, while everyone was asleep, I packed up my stuff. I made sure to take all my important documents like my birth certificate and social security card. I also logged into all my bank accounts and changed the passwords, just in case. I left a note explaining why I was leaving and went to stay with a friend. Since then, my phone has been blowing up with calls and texts from my family. My parents alternate between guilt trips and anger. They're saying I'm tearing the family apart and being incredibly selfish. Aubrey has been posting dramatic statuses on social media about how her own brother abandoned her. Mark even showed up at my workplace to shout at me, saying I was breaking Aubrey's heart and ruining her chances at success. Some of my extended family members have reached out after hearing a twisted version of events from my parents. Most of them are taking my parents' side, saying I should go home and make things right. Only my grandmother seemed doubtful of the story and asked for my side of things. I feel awful about the whole situation. Despite everything, I love my family and never wanted it to come to this. I've worked so hard for that money, taking on extra shifts and missing out on social events to save up. It represents my future and my dreams of going to grad school. I don't think it's fair for them to demand I give it up, especially for such an ill-conceived plan. At the same time, I feel guilty for moving out so abruptly. I worry that I'm overreacting, or that I should have tried harder to make them understand my perspective. The thought of being estranged from my family is heartbreaking, even though I know they haven't treated me fairly. I'm now crashing on my friend's couch and trying to figure out my next steps. I'm looking for a new place to live and considering taking a semester off to work full-time and save up more money. The stress of the situation is affecting my studies, and I'm worried about how this will impact my future. So Reddit, should I give my sister my savings and go back home? Or should I handle the situation differently? I'm lost and could really use some outside perspective on this mess. Update. It's been 8 months since I left home over my parents trying to force me to give my savings to my sister. A lot has changed. After moving out, I found a small room to rent near my college. It's not much, but it's mine. I've been balancing work and studies pretty well. I picked up more hours at the bookstore and even started tutoring on the side to make ends meet. It's been tough, but I'm managing. The best thing that's happened is meeting Sam. We met in one of my classes about 5 months ago. She's smart, kind, and incredibly supportive. When I told her about my family's situation, she listened without judgment and has been there for me ever since. For the first few months after I left, my family kept trying to contact me. The messages ranged from angry accusations to guilt-tripping pleas for me to come home. I maintained minimal contact, mostly just letting them know I was safe and focusing on my studies. Last week, everything changed. I was studying with Sam when my phone rang. It was my mom. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. My mom was crying on the other end of the line. She said they needed my help urgently. When I asked what was wrong, she just kept saying it was a medical emergency and that my dad needed help. She begged me to come home, I was confused and worried. I told her I needed to know exactly what was going on before I could decide what to do. She hesitated, then finally started explaining. After I left home, Aubrey and Mark had kept pressuring my parents to help start Aubrey's jewelry business. My parents, feeling guilty about how things had ended with me, decided to support Aubrey's dreams. My dad took out a large loan to fund the business. At first, things seemed to be going well. Aubrey and Mark appeared to be taking the business seriously. They had meetings with my parents discussing plans and showing them sketches of jewelry designs. My parents thought they were finally seeing Aubrey grow up and take responsibility. 2 months ago, Aubrey and Mark told my parents they needed to go to another city to source materials and meet with potential suppliers. My parents gave them most of the loan money for the trip. Aubrey and Mark left and never came back. My mom said they hadn't heard from them in weeks. Aubrey and Mark weren't answering calls or responding to messages. Their social media accounts had been deactivated. It was clear now that they had run away with the loan money. My parents were devastated. Not only had they lost a huge amount of money, but their daughter had betrayed them. Now, they were stuck with a massive loan they couldn't repay. The bank was threatening to foreclose on their house. As I listened to my mom sob on the phone, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt justified. This was exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I had warned them about. But mostly, I felt sad for my parents. They had made a huge mistake, but they didn't deserve this. I told my mom I was sorry they were going through this, but I wasn't in a position to help financially. I had just barely gotten on my feet and was still struggling to balance my own expenses with saving for grad school. She cried harder, but said she understood. After I hung up, I told Sam what had happened. She listened carefully, then suggested I reconsider helping my parents. She pointed out that this could be an opportunity to mend my relationship with them. Sam said that while they had treated me unfairly in the past, they were still my family and were in genuine need now. I spent the next few days thinking hard about what to do. I looked over my finances and talked more with Sam. In the end, I decided to help my parents, but on my own terms. I called my dad and told him I was willing to help, but I needed to know all the details first. We met at a coffee shop near my place. It was the first time I'd seen him in months. My dad looked older and more tired than I remembered. He broke down as he explained the full situation. The loan was for $40,000. Aubrey and Mark had taken about $30,000 with them when they left. The rest had been spent on initial business expenses and the family's living costs over the past months. I told my dad I was willing to help pay off the loan, but I had conditions. First, I would make the payments directly to the bank, not give money to my parents. Second, I would only be able to pay in small installments over time. Third, they needed to file a police report about Aubrey and Mark's actions. My dad agreed to everything. He apologized for how they had treated me and admitted they had been wrong to favor Aubrey for so long. He said losing Aubrey had made them realize how much they had taken me for granted. Over the next week, we worked out a plan. I would move back home to save on rent. The money I saved would go towards the loan payments. My parents agreed to treat me like an adult and respect my independence. We also agreed to family counseling to work on our relationship. It's been a month since I moved back home. Things are different. My parents are trying hard to repair our relationship. They ask about my studies and work and actually listen when I talk. They've stopped making comments about my choices or comparing me to others. The situation with Aubrey is still painful for all of us. The police haven't been able to locate her or Mark yet. My parents are coming to terms with the fact that she might never come back. It's been hard for them to accept that their actions over the years contributed to Aubrey becoming the person she is. Financially, it's tight. A large chunk of my income is going towards the loan payments. I've had to put my grad school plans on hold for now, but I'm hopeful that we'll get through this eventually. Sam has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She often comes over for dinner and has helped my parents and me navigate some difficult conversations. My parents adore her, which is nice but also a bit ironic given how they treated my girlfriends in the past. Looking back, I don't regret leaving when I did. That time on my own helped me grow and gain confidence in myself. But I'm glad I was able to help when my family truly needed it. It's not perfect, but we're slowly rebuilding our relationship on a healthier foundation. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. The loan will take years to pay off, and we have a lot of emotional healing to do as a family. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're on the right path. I've learned a lot about forgiveness and setting boundaries. I'm learning to stand up for myself while still being compassionate. It's a delicate balance, but I'm getting better at it every day. To those who supported me in my original post, thank you. Your advice and kind words helped me through a really tough time. To those in similar situations, I'd say this. It's okay to protect yourself and your future, but also be open to the possibility of reconciliation if the circumstances are right. As for Aubrey, I have mixed feelings. Part of me is angry at her for what she did to our parents. But mostly, I feel sorry for her. She's lost her family and will have to live with the consequences of her actions. I hope she gets help and turns her life around someday. For now, I'm focusing on my studies, my job, my relationship with Sam, and rebuilding my family relationships. It's not easy, but I'm hopeful for what the future holds. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this journey. It's been a wild ride, but I think I'm finally on stable ground.